Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar where we will go through how you can automate and elevate your request process using Monday.com forms. My name is Ellen, and I am part of the customer success team here at Omnitas, and I'll be taking you through how to create your request form from start to end today. If you have any questions along the way, please do ask them, and I'll try to respond to them as soon as I can. Okay, well, thank you then, and let's get started. So in Monday.com, zoom in a bit here, we can, in all of our boards, we can create forms. So to create a form in Monday.com, we simply add a new board, and we click on the little plus sign here next to main table to add a new form view. We get to give our form view a name. So for example, request form. And then we just get started building. We click on the blue button to build form, and the Monday.com form builder will appear. Here you can see at the moment we have a title, we have a field where we can add a description, and we have a name field. The title will always be the board name per default, but here we can input anything at all. To add a description to our form, we simply click in the little description box here to add our description. Like this. When we're using the Monday.com forms, all of our questions will be columns in our main table. At the moment, you can see we only have one question, the name question, since if we go back to our board and take a look, in this board, we do not have any columns at the moment. When building our forms, we can either start adding our columns here, and they will then appear in our form as the name question did, or we can actually add the questions directly in the form builder, which often is the easiest way. In this example, we will be creating a marketing request form. So what we will start with is basically adding our questions. So when we get a new marketing request, it might be good for us to have a request name. So you see that all of our questions also have the possibility to add a description if we want to clarify something to the requester. All questions can be marked as required if you like. Then we simply tick in this little box in the left corner here. You see that a little red star appear here at the top, and this will not allow the requester to submit the form without having inputted an answer here. To add a new question to our form through the form builder, we simply click on the little plus sign down here below. We then get to select what type of question do we want to have. Depending on what we're asking, we maybe would like to have a different type of question. In this case, when we're having our marketing request form here, the first thing we'd like to know is some contact information to the requester. So we can add a text field for the name. we can mark this as required because this is important information that we need everybody to input. It might also be good regarding contact information to have an email address to the requester, just so you know who should we contact if we have any questions, who should we deliver the material to, and so on. So we click to add a new question and we choose the email type. This is also a question that we will mark as required because this is really important. Now we have all the basic information we need. We have the contact information, we have the name of the request. Now we need to start thinking about what more do we need? What more information do we need for our request? So depending on what type of request you can get, you might want to have different questions. Sometimes you maybe want to have a really simple form to make it really easy for people to submit answers. And sometimes maybe you want to have a more complex form because you want to be able to control the data in the request that you get. You know that when we have this type of request, we always need to get this and this and this and this question answered. So when you start building your form, the first step is always to start thinking about what do we need to know when we get the new request. In this case, where we have our marketing request form, we, for example, would like to know which type of request is this. So we click here on the plus sign to add a new question. Because in our case here, we can have different type of marketing requests. A marketing request type will always be only one type. If you want, in this case, if you want to ask for several different types, you actually need to add several different requests. So in this case, we will choose the single select question because that will allow the user to only input one answer. We input our question name here. And you see that we have got a few options already here from Monday. These we can rename by simply clicking on the label and adding our new name. So for example, in this case, we have a social media post. We can also get a request for maybe a Google ad. Or sometimes maybe people need to request some sort of PowerPoint presentation. I will mark this question as required as well, because this is really important. When we get a new request, we would also like to get some sort of brief where the requester can input in free text what should the request involve. We'll click on the plus sign to add a new question. And in this case, we will choose the long text column. The long text column gives you a bigger window to write in than the short text question that we used for the name, and gives the submitter a better overview of which text they also already have written. So here we name this question brief. And in this case, maybe we want to give the submitter some sort of information. We maybe have a few questions that we always want them to include or answer in the brief. Then we can input that as a description. We mark this as required. And now, already now, we have a quite basic request form. If I click on the build button here at my top right corner, preview, I can actually take a look. How will this form look for the submitter? A new window will then appear with my form, and you can see we have all of our questions that we added to our form. You can see which questions are mandatory, that have the little red star here. You can see for our single select question, we have our options that we added. You see that we have a submit button here. This form looks quite boring. It has no branding at all. We have no background and so on. This is something that we really easy can adjust in the Monday forms. So if I close this window and we go back to our request form, at the very top here in the form builder, we have a tab for Customize. See here. Here we can start have a welcome trial to our form. If we, for example, want to have some sort of information popping up first, we can have a submission view, and we can also adjust our thank you screen. In the form builder, we can also do the major part of the adjustments. Here, you can actually upload your logo. So if I click here, I can choose to upload a picture from my computer. So here, for example, I have a logo here, and I can upload it. I can also choose to have a background. By clicking here at the picture in the top right corner, I can select to have a single color as a background. I can also select to have an image. And here I can either choose from a few already existing images, like this, or this, or I can also upload my own if I'd like to. Here I can also select where I want my form to be placed in the window, if I want to have it aligned in the middle, like I have now, if I want to have it to the left or to the right. Perfect. See, we got a question in the chat. Can I use these request forms for anyone, or do people need access to our Monday account to be able to fill them in? Great question. And one of the strengths with the Monday.com form is that we can actually allow people outside of our Monday account to submit them. So if we're, for example, a marketing team that are working within Monday, but it's only the marketing team that have access to our Monday account, only they have licenses, but the rest of the organization, they don't work within Monday. But we still want to be able to get their requests into Monday because we want to work with our requests within Monday. Then we can create a form, and we can actually, when we are finished with our form, we can send out a link to that form, and they will still be able to input data directly into Monday through the form. So that is fully possible and one of the greatest strengths with the forms. Right now, as I mentioned, this form is quite basic. Sometimes we have more complex requests that we would like to be able to maybe create different paths in our requests with different questions depending on answers. In Monday forms, we have the possibility to actually create conditional questions where we can create those types of paths. So if we go down to our, for example, our request type question here. In this case, people can request quite different content. Social media posts, Google ad, and PowerPoint presentations. Those type of requests might involve really different work, and we maybe need to ask different questions in order to get the full information, depending on which choice people make here. In that case, we can actually make this a conditional question and present different following question depending on which choice the submitter takes here. So if I click on this question, I have a little option here to include condition. When ticking this in, a little gray box will appear that allows me to select if answer is one of. And here I can select one, or I can select several. So in this case, I know that if we get a request that is either a social media post or a Google ad, I want to know if we have a publishing date. So I click on the plus sign here within the gray box to add that question inside of the condition. I then go down to find the date question, because if it's a publishing date, it will be a date, and I like to have it as a date column. The same way as with the regular questions, I get to input my question name, and I can add a description if I like as well. This. For all requests that are social media posts or Google ad, this question is required. I always want the submitter to input this when they input a social media or a Google ad request. So I will tick in the required field here as well. Regarding if the request type is a PowerPoint presentation, maybe I like to ask different types of questions. If it's a PowerPoint presentation, it could be relevant to know number of slides, for example. To add another condition, I click here, add another condition. And instead of having if answer is one of social media or Google ad, I will choose PowerPoint presentation instead. I will then add a number column. And as for number of slides. And this field will also be required for the PowerPoint presentation. If we go back and preview this form now, first of all, we can see we have our logo here, we have our nice background. And if I start inputting data here, I'm requesting a sales deck in this case, and my name is Ellen. I will input my email address. You see now, we can only see below the request type question, we can only see the brief question. We cannot see the new questions that we added inside of the conditions. But if I now choose PowerPoint presentation, because my sales deck will be a PowerPoint presentation, the number of slides question appears. And I can input 10. I input the brief. And when I click submit now, this is where the magic happens. I go back to my intake request, and I go outside the form builder and back to the main table. Now we can see that a whole new item has been created, 100% automatic from our form request. We see that we have the request name sales deck, we have a requester name Ellen, we have an email address to me. All questions have been populated based on the form. We see that the publishing date for this request is empty because this question did not appear in the form when we choose PowerPoint presentation. But if we go back and we preview the form and input a new request for a Facebook post, input all the same data, but in this case we choose social media post instead of PowerPoint presentation. Now we can see that the publishing date will appear, and we can select the exact date we would like to have this published. For example, the 28th of June. We input our brief text and we submit it. And when we go back to the board, we can see that our Facebook post request has been input here. Using the conditional questions, you can create really complex forms where you have different paths and you can have only one form for a lot of different intakes. But you can also have quite simple forms. When deciding if you want to have a long, complex form, your internal processes are the ones that are deciding. Now we have created our request board, we have created our request form. And to share our request form, we simply click here on copy form link. We will then have copied the link to this form. And if I open a new tab here in my browser and I input that link, the form will be opened. This link can be distributed on your internal forums, as well as directly emailed to the people that needs to have it. In Monday, we can also add several different forms inside the same board. So if we, for example, are marketing bureau, and we can get requests that are both internal requests, and we can also get external requests. Then maybe we want to have quite a big difference in our forms in the questions that we ask. We can, of course, do the same way as we have done with our request type and have the conditional questions. And basically, in the beginning of the form, ask the submitter, is this an internal or an external request? But maybe that's not something you want to leave up to the actual submitter. What you can do then is that you have two different form links. So if I rename this form to internal requests, I could actually add a new form. I click on the plus sign here and I add a new form. Now you can see I already have a lot of questions for free, and that is because we already have created them. They already exist in our board as columns. We can then set up this differently. If we go into edit, we can add new questions, just the same way as we did when we created the form. We can also hide questions. So for example, if we, for the external requests, we don't ask for publishing date, then we simply can click hide question here. Because we don't want to delete the question, because then we will delete the whole column. So if we click on the little I here, we can simply hide it in this form. If I hide the name as well, for example, and we go into the preview mode, you can see now that the request name question has been removed. And the other, let's see here, the question for the request date, the publish date, has also been hidden. But if we go back to our original form, our internal forms, and we open it up, those questions will still maintain here. So there's a good way to control which type of data you get in the different submissions if you have different types of request processes. I see that we got another question in the chat. Are there any column types that can't be used in the forms? And that's a great question. There are a few column types that cannot be used in the form. And And one example of that, if we go back here, is, for example, the connected boards column that cannot be used. And we can find out which columns that cannot be used when we, if we go into edit form, and when we try to add a new question. Because these alternatives are the column types that are available within the form. So we can see here that we have the short text, long text, number. We have the people column, and this is quite a tricky one, because if we add this now, we can see that a little pop-up shows restricted question type. The people column is available to use within the forms. However, since we then need access to the actual Monday users within our Monday account, the form will then have to be restricted, so only people who has a Monday account can submit the form. So that's good to know about. And in this case, I would recommend you to maybe use the people column when it's only an internal request form that you're using to control the inputted data, but all requesters always have a Monday account. When it's more of an external form, or if you're using it whole wide in the organization where the rest of the organization doesn't use Monday, I don't recommend you to use the people column. In that case, I recommend you to use the text field for name and email column for email address instead. Perfect. Now, when we have created our form, we have actually created two forms, one internal form and one external form. This. We can go back to our main table and take a look here. Now we see all of our requests. We have them in our new request group here, which is our only group. We have our columns for our different questions. But when we set up a request form, it's often because we want to control the data that get inputted, so we can make sure that we got all the information we need, and maybe also that we have capacity to take on the requests. What is a great way to use Monday's full capabilities to control this is to set up automations that can, where we can set up approving stage, we can set up automations to send emails to the requesters, and so on. So if we start by doing that, we can start by adding a new group. We can have our new requests. We can also have our approved requests, so we can see which are the requests where we have gotten all the necessary information that we have approved and have started working on, like this. Sometimes we might get a request that we won't approve because we don't have all the information, or maybe the request is just something that we cannot do. We can then add a group for all the denied requests, like this. If we add a status column now, click on the plus sign here to add a new column. And we can move this to the top of the table. We can add a few options here. So we can have our new request as our gray default label, so all requests coming in will always have that value. We can have our denied requests. We can have our approved requests. And we can also have maybe an option where we need to indicate that this is not an approved request yet, it's not denied either, but we need more information from the requester in order to make a decision. So here we can have info. When we have this column with the different options, we can set up automations to move the requests between the different groups. So we click on Automate here at our top right corner, and we create a custom automation. The automations in Monday allows us to select a trigger event, and based on that trigger event, we can make something automatically happen. So in this case, we want our trigger event to be when status changes. And we select our status column, not our request type, our status column. And we say that when status changes to approved request, we want the request to be moved into a group. And we want it to be moved into the approved group. We'll click Create Automation to add this to our board. And if, for example, we see that the sales deck that I have requested here is perfect, we have everything we need to start working with this, and we have the capacity to work with it within the deadline. We approve this request, and we can see that the request was then moved into the approved group. We can set up the same automation for the denied. So if I go into board automations, I can actually just copy this and make the change the status label here into denied and the group into denied. Create automation. And this Facebook post, we do not have capacity to do this at all this time, so we will deny this. And the request will then be moved to the denied group. Using this type of automations, we can also maybe create a separate project board where we can work on our different projects. Because when we get a new request, for sales deck, for example, maybe we need copywriting done for that. We need some pictures inputted and so on. So we need to break that down a bit more. And our request board, this we want to have nice and clean. So this may be not the best way to have it. So in that case, you can actually create a new board for your marketing production, for example. And instead of having the automation that says when status change to approved, move to approved group, we could just change the recipe. So instead of having move item to approved, we would then move item to board. And here we would select our then marketing production board that does not exist at the moment. And we can also map out which data that we would like to be transferred there. Perfect. This is a good introduction to creating the forms, the request forms in Monday. And as I mentioned before, there is basically no stopping you in how complex you would like to have your forms or how easy and short you would like to have them. I can see that we have no new questions. See here. So I would like to thank you for your time today and wish you a really pleasant day. Bye.